lecture, I will show you how we can create profit center, master data, and its standard hierarchy. And then I will demonstrate you how we can create cost center, master data, and its standard hierarchy. So I'm on the SAP Easy Access screen. So in the last lecture, we have finished all the configurations related to SAP controlling. Now we are ready to create the profit center, cost center as an end user. So it is a part of accounting. We will go under the node accounting, and then we will go under the node controlling, and then go to the subnode profit center, accounting, master data, and standard hierarchy. Now, if you're wondering why I'm going directly under the standard hierarchy, I can also go to the menu path profit center, individual processing, and then create. So basically, it doesn't make any difference. Rather, I will recommend you to use the transaction code to create a standard hierarchy and the master data in the same screen. So you do not have to come out of the screen. You can do both jobs at the same time in the same screen. That's why I prefer this transaction code to create profit center master data. So double click on KC5HN, and now you have to enter your controlling area, that is ZSUS, and you will be landed on this standard hierarchy for profit center state screen. Now here, if you see that you have got the standard hierarchy which was created in the configuration of profit center last lecture, and we also created the dummy profit center which we have created before we work on profit center standard hierarchy and its master data. So now here we must create profit centers which we need it for our SAP S/4HANA sourcing and procurement module. And as I mentioned that the first profit center we need is for the raw materials, because the profit center also store the data as cost reducing revenue. You can click this button, create, and first you have to select a standard hierarchy, and under that you can create a lower level group, and then you have to enter the group name. So according to the business requirement, first group is inventory, and I will enter the controlling area name as ZSUS1, ZSUS-INV. So it is just a naming convention which some companies follow, and then press enter. Now you have to create the profit center under this group. So click this button again, and this time you can choose profit center. So you have to enter the profit center name, and for the profit center, the companies mostly follow the naming conventions as P stands for profit center, your company code SUK1, and I stands for inventory, RM raw material 01. So for example, the profit center name can start from P, and then the company code, that is SUK1, and then the profit center. So for example, we are creating a profit center for raw materials. So R represents a raw and M represents the materials. So before raw material, you can also select the group name, first word. For example, you can choose I inventory, and then you can choose RM. And for the raw materials and a number for the raw materials, it can be 01. So because you can have a multiple raw materials and for them. If you create a multiple profit centers, then you can identify them through the numbers like 01, 02, 03, like that. Now you can enter the raw materials. Name, raw materials, long text, raw materials, 01, PC. PC stands for profit center. and you can choose the name of the person responsible, and then you can choose the department that is optional. Now here, as I mentioned in the last lecture, the segments are assigned to the profit center. So we have to assign the segments into the profit center if we want to create segments reporting to our organization. So click this button and I will select the segment which I have created, that was segment ZAB1. Now if you go under indicators, you do not have to do anything here now. Go to the tab company codes and you will notice that when you create a profit center, all the company codes with the controlling area are assigned to it by default. So if you don't want to assign a profit center to a particular company code, you can unmark the checkbox. Otherwise, by default, profit center can be assigned to all the company codes which you have created for your organization. And if you go to the second tab, address, so you will notice a profit center can have an address and it can have also a communication data. So that's it. That's what you have to do here. Once you have finished, hit save. So your data has been saved. So this is created an end user level. That's why the dialog works for customizing request will not pop up. So remember, this is the job of end user. So when an end user creates any master data or any transaction, there is no customizing request dialog box opens because it's not customization. So we have to create further profit centers according to the business requirements, and further we will create a profit center related to training materials, finished goods, semi-finished goods, and then we will create a group name administration, and under administration services and rent profit centers. And under asset group we will create a profit center of fixtures and fittings. So very quickly, I will show you that you can create a second profit center by selecting the existing profit center. And this time you can click copy button and you do not have to enter some details manually. So you just have to enter the profit center name and so you just have to enter the profit center name and this is for training materials. So I will choose the profit center name as per the naming convention that will be PSUK1 ITM01 and change the name as the trading materials, long text, trading materials 01 profit center, and you can choose the second segment ZAB2, press enter, and the second profit center you has been created. You can also choose the company code. Both the company codes have been assigned. Then once you finish it, hit on save and your data was saved. Now, if you're wondering what about this activation status, which is in red icon. So once you create all the profit centers, what do you have to do? You have to click this button that says activate. When you click on it, so it will show you this dialog box where you can have to mark the check boxes against all the profit centers you have created. Then click this activation button and check successfully carried out. Now you can see that the activation status has been turned into green color. Now these profit centers are ready to be used under the transactions. So similarly, I will create the other profit centers and we will show you. Alright guys, I have created the profit center standard hierarchy and the must-have data for all the profit centers which we needed in our SAP S/4HANA sourcing and procurement module. Secondly, you will notice is the analysis period. So profit center master data has got a time frame. It means that if an organization wants to expire a profit center later on after several years, they want to replace another profit center. So they want to create a new profit center replacing the old one. So they will create a new profit center from the new date. So that will happen that this profit center will be expired or inactive. And then a new profit center will take its place. That's why some organizations use this time frame as well for profit center master data. So that's how we can create the profit centers. So I will proceed to the next creation of cost centers, a standard hierarchy, and master data. Cost centers standard hierarchy go under the node cost center accounting again. It's the activity of end users, so I'm doing it in the SAP Easy Access screen. Cost center accounting, go to the master data and then standard hierarchy. You have a transaction code OKEON. So you can also create an individual cost center by using the transaction code KS01. But I will recommend you to use this transaction code as it's very easy to create or to look at the standard hierarchy. To create groups under that and then cost centers, so double click on it and you will be landed on the screen. So first I will enter the name of the group name, that is cost center standard hierarchy. So before create any cost center, if you are wondering what is cost center, so let me give you a definition to the slides. So cost center is an organizational unit within a controlling area that represents the location where the costs are incurred inside the organization. The company management use cost center for a process-oriented view of official data. A cost center in a controlling stores the data information just like a general ledger account in the financial accounting. Cost center captures the plan or actual cost of an organization as per the department, product, person, etc. And revenue postings to them are always statistical. As cost posting to the profit center are always statistical into the profit center, there is one-to-one relationship between a cost center and a company code. A cost center derives its currency from the company costed. The cost center can have an address and the communication data just like the profit centers. So just like the profit center, I will go follow the business requirements to create our cost centers. So in order to do that, I will click on this button and then first I will create a lower level group. Now this time what I will do, I will create all the groups first. So I will choose the group name as ZS US and first one will be the inventory. Then I will select it and then copy button so that I can create the second group. It is much easier to create the groups first and then the cost centers under that. So group name ZSUS admin ADMN. So this will be administration. So it is not necessary that the group names and the cost center For example, we will create cost center, profit centers for the same purpose. Like we have got raw materials as a profit center and raw materials as a cost center. So it's possible that you will not see these scenarios in every company. It is possible that the profit centers can have different name and the cost centers if it is a raw material. If it is a cost, go to the profit center, then it can have a different name as well. So I have seen these scenarios in some business organizations. Okay, now we will create the cost centers one by one under these groups. So select this and then click cost center. And I will follow the naming conventions again. Cost centers 1, SUK 1, RM01. So this time I will use the last word from our company code, that is SUK1, and I will choose the first one and then the company code and then the first alphabet of the group name, that is inventory. So if you're going to create the first cost center as a raw material, then with this it will be an RM01, and you can also see that the cost center is also has got the time frame. So you have a company can expire a cost center later on after several years and replace it with a new cost center. So its name will be a raw materials, description as raw materials cost center, raw material 01 cost center. And you can enter the name of the person. Now you have to enter the cost center category. So the cost center category classifies a cost center according to their usage or origin. For an example, we have got this list, which is a standard list provided by SAP. We can also create our own cost centers category if we want. So we have to select a cost center category that looks relevant to the type of this cost center. So let's select production because the raw materials are mostly used in production. I will select production, go to the organization tab, and here you can see that all the cost centers can be assigned to only one company code, unlike profit centers. So currency has been picked up and from the controlling area. So select our company code SUK1, and you have to choose the business area which we have created. So we have created our business area for drilling machines, hammers, saws, and grinders. I will select the business area for drilling machines, and this raw materials belongs to the production of drilling machines. Now we have to assign the profit center. So click this button, and if you remember the profit center name, it is easier for you to just copy and paste it. So for raw materials, I will select the raw materials, and then I can double click on it and it will be assigned. So profit center can be assigned to several cost centers. So go to the indicators, and we don't need to do anything here. You can see that other tabs. So don't need to do anything here. So cost center can have an address and it can have a communication data. History will show you if you have made any changes to the cost center, and that's it. So once you've finished, hit save and the data has been saved. And you will be noticed that activation has been done automatically. You don't need to click any activate button for the cost center. Similarly, you can create the second cost center by selecting it and then click copy. And the second cost center which we'll have to create is trading materials. So I will choose the naming convention for the trading materials. So it will be 1 SUK1, TM01. Name will be the trading materials or trading goods. Description trading materials 01 cost center. So I will choose a different cost center category because it is a trading materials and trading materials is the one which we do not procure. Rather we purchase from the third party or from our suppliers. Then we will deliver it to the customer. So trading materials definition is different from raw materials. So the trading materials will come either materials or it can also come as a sales. So let's select material. That's it. So go to the organization tab and we have copied from the first cost center. So that's why all the information have been copied. Now you have to replace the profit center. That is for the trading materials. Or if you remember the name of it, so you can just replace R with T and then press enter. And then the trading materials profit center can be assigned to this cost center and we do not need to enter any data in the other tabs. Just hit save. Similarly, I will create the other cost centers and we will assign the relevant profit centers to them and we'll show you on the screen. Alright guys, I have created the remaining cost centers if you can see on my screen. So I have created the finished goods cost center and very quickly I will show you that which cost center category I have used. So for finished goods, I have used the cost center category as materials and I have used the profit center assignment for finished goods. And you can see that the currency has been picked up from the company code. Similarly, for semi-finished goods, I have used the category for production because the raw materials and the semi-finished goods are used in production. So after the production, we have finished goods. So that is the combination of both raw materials and finished to semi-finished goods. So under administration, I have created this cost center and I have used the cost center category for service cost center and an organization I have used this following profit center. So similarly for rent I have just used, you can also notice that the business areas as well and that I am using a different business area for rent. So the cost center category I am using for rent is administration and for assets I am using the cost center category management. So on the organization tab you can see the business area I'm using for source. So and the profit center I'm using for fixtures and fittings. So you have to create the cost center by using the same steps which I have demonstrated to you in this lecture. That's the end of our cost center standard hierarchy and master data. So I will proceed to the next activity. In this lecture, I will demonstrate you the configuration related to currency settings, maintain exchange rates, ledgers, and accounting principles. The transaction code we use for this configuration is fancy ledgers. And we need this configuration in order to work for SAP S/4HANA sourcing and procurement on SAP system. So we are on the SAP system. Now, if you run the transaction code fancy underscore ledger, so press enter to ignore any warning messages. And if you double click on the currency types, that's the first thing we have to check here. So you have to check here that the currency type 10 and that is company code currency and currency type 30 exist in this list. If they do not, then you have to create new entries and create them. And further, you can see the standard settings done by SAP. That the number 10 company code currency and the valuation view is legal valuation and then the currency have 30 group currency legal valuation. So that's what you have to check in this currency type. Remember, we used to set up additional currencies or local currencies by using the transaction code OB22 in SAP ECC version. So that is the older version of SAP S4HANA. Now the transaction code FINCI underscore ledger has been introduced in SAP S4HANA Business Suite, which is new to the currency settings. Now the second activity you have to do is to check the global currency conversion settings. Double click on it. Now you will be landed on the screen. Now here you have to check that the currency type 10 is sourcing from document currency 00. Another thing you have to check in this currency type that the currency type 00 also exists besides the currency type 10 and the currency type 30, because you need currency type 00, that is the document currency here in the global currency conversion settings, and the source currency type is document currency, and the currency type is company code currency. So what will happen that we need this configuration. If we have to translate the document currency into the company code currency, and that is the translation rate, and the exchange rate type we are using M. So we will maintain the exchange rates as per our next activity. But you can see the standard settings done by SAP. If your system cannot display the settings, then you have to create new entry and do the same setting, which is exactly I'm showing you on the screen. Now the third activity, currency conversion settings for company code. Press enter to continue. Now here you have to make sure that for your company code the conversion setting exists. So go to the position and look at your company code, that is SUK1. And you can see, so in this activity, what exactly we have to do. If you are using group currency as our controlling area currency, so the translation of the currency should be made into the company code currency. For an example, from US dollars to GBP, and the exchange rate type will again be M, right? Then enter our company code SUK1, and the currency type is 30, that is group currency, and the currency is US dollars. And then the source currency type is 10, that is the company code currency. And further you have to check the exchange rate type, that is M, and M is the standard translation at every rate, and translation date type. I will select it as a translation date, or you can also choose the documented or posting date. So let's select the translation date. And similarly, you can do the same settings for your US company code, which is SUS1. So that's it. Once you finish, you can hit. Now, the next thing you have to do, as you can see that we are using the exchange rate M. So where we have to tell the SAP system what is the exchange rate if a document we post in US dollars in our UK company whose location currency is GBP. So how the translation will be done from US dollars to exchange rate, and where we can maintain the exchange rate. So that's what I have to show you. So we use the transaction code OB08, and you will be landed on the screen, and here you just have to click new entries and then choose the exchange rate type M, and then you have to choose the today's date, and then we are translating from US dollars to GBP, so I will type it as a US dollars, and we are using the direct quotations. So now we have to check the rate of internet system. So normally in the live business environment, the system is integrated with the third party and the third party updates the exchange rates on a daily basis or several times in a day. But that's what I'm showing you how we can manually enter the exchange rates from US dollars to GBP. So go to the internet browser. As you can see that I've just searched on USD to GBP, 1 USD to GBP, and it is giving me the rate point, which is 0.79. So I will go to the link 1 USD or GBP, so that is xe.com, and xe is giving me the long exchange rate. So that is ideally to enter into the SAP system. So SAP allows 5 digit after the dot. So I will copy it and then go back to the SAP system and then paste it and then enter the exchange rate to that is GBP and then press enter. Once you finish, hit save and the data was saved. So we have maintained the exchange rates from US dollars to GBP. Now go back and the next activity we have to do is to check these settings for ledger configurations. And here you can see that the ledger, leading ledger, that is 0L. So what exactly is leading ledger and why we need that? So the leading ledger actually contains the complete set of document items in the table EC So in each company code, the leading ledger receives exactly the same settings that apply to that company code, such as currencies, the fiscal year variant, and the variant of the posting period. It is also based on accounting principles that is used for the consolidations of financial statements. As you can see that you can assign the accounting principles of ledger at ledger level. And now what you have to do here and what we need in order to work in our SAP S4 HANA sourcing and procurement is that so when we post the logistics invoice into the SAP system, that will be the accounting document which will be generated as a result of invoice verification should be posted by using the ledger leading ledger that is 0L without any error. So you just have to make sure that leading ledger is assigned to your company code. So if you double click on company code settings for the ledger, press enter to ignore the warning. So you can see your company code here that is automatically or that is assigned by default. And you do not need to do anything here because the leading ledger, the company code is assigned by default. And further, you can assign the additional currencies or it freely defined currency per company or ledger in addition. And next, you have to check that the accounting principles for ledger and company code exist. So if you select one of your company code and then double click on accounting principles for ledger and company code, you can see that by default, accounting principles that represents international financial reporting standards has already been assigned. So if you cannot find anything here, then you click on new entries and enter an accounting principles such as US GAAP or UK GAAP, whatever the business requirement is. So I will not change anything here because this is not SAP S4 HANA Finance training. So I will keep the settings as they are. So that's it. These are the activities which you have to do in this transaction code. Further, if we go back to the ledger, so we have got option to create another non-leading ledger, or we can also create an extension ledger or appendix ledger. But we don't need them in order to work in SAP S/4HANA sourcing and procurement. And I will proceed to the next activity. In this lecture, I will demonstrate you the configuration for GL accounts, determination for open items exchange rate differences configurations, and its transaction code is OBA1. Why is this configuration important for sourcing and procurement? Because the sourcing and procurement or material management consultant or users is responsible to post invoice verifications and logistics invoice verification for post the accounting documents. So for the accounting document, if you do not configure this exchange rate differences and the GL account determination for that, then you may receive an error. So in order to avoid that error, it's better to configure the GL accounts determination for exchange rate differences. And this activity or configuration then supports the month end or year end closing when the accounting department executes the automatic postings for foreign currency valuations. So I will demonstrate you on the SAP system by using the transaction code OBA1. I'm on the SAP Easy Access screen now. So go to the transaction code OBA1 and press enter. Now you will be landed on the screen. Now you just have to work on the transaction KDF. That's where you have to assign the GL accounts for automatic postings for exchange rate differences. Now, so double click on it and enter the chart of accounts and press enter to continue. Now you will be landed on the screen. You will also notice that the GL accounts is already been assigned to this transaction code. Why? Because we have copied the chart of accounts when we have created the company code SUK1 from the SAP Global template. The assignment of GL accounts also has been copied. So this is the purpose of copying the global template or the SAP template. So that some of the configurations is copied and then the company keep those configurations which they need and rest of the configurations can be removed. Now if you double click on this GL account, first of all, what is this GL account number? 140,000 and 160,000. You need to know these the GL account numbers, because we are going to assign these two GL accounts when we are creating the customer and the vendor master data in order to work in SAP S/4HANA sourcing and procurement model. So first of all, this GL account 140,000, and if you go to the transaction code FS00 and then display this GL account which is 140,000, then you will see that it is a domestic receivables account. And in the other words, we will also call it this type of GL accounts as a reconciliations account. Some people call this type of GL accounts as a sub-ledger account as well, because the system automatically posts into this account, and it also ensures that the total of the account balance is always zero. And if we go to the control data, so here you will notice that it says the reconciliation account for an account type is customers. And this is always on the balance sheet. It is not an expense or the revenue account, but it's a balance sheet account. As you can see, this GL type account is a balance sheet account. So you just have to remember this GL account number. If it is not created at your end, then you can create by looking at the same settings. And you can also note down that field status group that is being used by this GL account number. Secondly, if you go back, OBA1 transaction code, if you look at the second GL number, that is I mentioned, which is 160,000. So what about this GL account? This is the accounts payable domestic. So 140,000 was the customer's receivables, and this is the vendor, and the other one is a subledger account, that is reconciliation account. Okay, and it's created a balance sheet account. And now if you go to the control tab, as you can see here, it says reconciliation, or the account type is vendors, and the field status group is Z067. And if this account is not copied from the SAP template of the company code and you cannot find it, then you can create it manually by using the transaction code FS00. And we need these two accounts, 140,000, 160,000, to assign them when we create the customer master data and the vendor master data in our upcoming lectures. So that's it. We have to make sure that the GL account determination has already been done in the transaction code OBA1, and you do not need to work on the other GL accounts because we just concerned about these two GL accounts, and there is 160,000 and 140,000. So 99% of all the GL accounts will be copied, but just in case if they are not copied, you know how to create them by using the transaction FS00. In this lecture, I will demonstrate the configuration for tax on sales or purchases. And this activity is a part of accounts receivables and account payables in SAP S/4HANA Finance. Now, the tax configuration is very important if we want to work in SAP S/4HANA sourcing and procurement module, because we need input tax in purchase order, and that input tax will be copied when we create logistics invoice verification. So that's why we need tax configuration in place. That is actually a job of SAP S/4HANA Finance consultant. But in order to work in this training, we have to configure and make sure that if we are going to use the global SAP template for taxes, so we have to ensure that the templates for SAP S/4HANA tax course is already existing to a SAP system. And here are the few transaction codes which you have to go through and make sure that the settings already exist for them or not. For example, the first one is to assign the country tax calculation procedure, and its transaction code is OBBG. And the second one is to maintain tax code, tax rate, and tax account configuration by using the transaction code FTXP. And then the automatic posting into the input and output taxes, GL account configurations, and the transaction code is OB40. And then allocate the company code for non-taxable transaction configurations, and the transaction code is OBCL. So always I recommend these four transaction codes to SAP S/4HANA sourcing and procurement learners to go through them and make sure that the configurations already exist or not. If not, then we have to do them manually. So I'm on the SAP screen now. So let us go to all the four transaction codes one by one. So the first transaction code is OBBG, and you will be landed on the screen. So go to the position and look at your country. My country is GB, so you have to ensure that the tax calculation procedure is already assigned to your country. If not, then you have to assign it. So SAP has already delivered the templates for tax procedures, and you can take a look and then choose them according to your country. So that's the first thing you have to check. And the second transaction is FTXP, and enter your country GB. Here you have to ensure that the tax code exists under the country key. So if I click this list button, you will have this list open. And here you can see that the SAP has provided the templates starting from A and B. all the tax codes starting from alphabet A represents output tax, and output tax is one which we charge to the customers. And the tax code starting from alphabet V represents the input tax, the tax code which our suppliers charge to us. So as you can see on our screen, most often we will be using this tax code V1 in our sourcing and procurement training. So you can note down, and you can also note it down its tax rate as well. If you select this tax code and then press enter, you will check these further settings. And you can notice that the input tax is highlighted in blue, is activated, and then it has got the tax rate as 20. And you can also change the rate accordingly to your country. It can be 18% or it can be 10%, etc. So any tax rate you want, you can change it on the screen. And the second thing you have to check if the GL account is already linked into the tax account for automatic posting. If you click this button, tax account, and then enter your chart of accounts, press enter to continue. So the GL account is 1454000. So you can also note down this GL account number because this is the GL account which we will be looking when we post the logistics invoice verification in our upcoming lecture. So that you know how this account is being picked up. So similarly, you can also look at the tax code for output tax and we use it A1. Press enter to continue. And you can see that the tax rate is assigned against output tax. And if you click on tax account, you can also see that the GL account that is assigned to the output tax, that is 175,000. So that's what you have to make sure that these settings exist. Now the next transaction code you have to check is OB40. You will be landed on this. Now suppose if in this last transaction code for FTXP, then I showed you that the tax accounts exist for them. But if those tax account does not exist at your end, how can you assign them? So this is the transaction code OB40 where you have to assign the GL accounts to your tax code. So first of all, I will look at the input tax or output tax in this screen, and so the first is the output tax is identified by the transaction MWC. So here you are. If you double click on it and enter the chart of accounts, INT, press enter to continue. So this is the screen where you will assign the GL accounts to the tax code, and automatically the tax code will pick up the GL accounts. That is 175,000. And go back. The next transaction you have to check is VST, which represents the input tax. So here we go. So double click on the input tax and you can see the assignment of account numbers 154,000. If you are wondering what is the structure of this, do you look out for input tax? I will show you that as well. If you run the transaction code FS00 and if I enter 154,000 and then display, you see that the input tax that is all created on the balance sheet account side and the account group is GL accounts. So if you go to the control data, so the important thing in the GL account structure or the setting is that the tax category is input tax account. And it has got a less than symbol, which you can see on the screen. So if you click on this button and have a look at the other symbols for the tax categories, you have input tax account, and similarly for output tax you will also have the symbol. What about these minus and plus symbols? So basically these are assigned to the profit and loss accounts. So that is, if you want to assign these categories to profits and loss accounts, So the tax code will be mandatory to be assigned at the transaction level. For an example, a purchase order, an invoice, an accounting document, so you cannot avoid the tax code. So in that case, if you assign any of these two tax categories, input tax or output tax, and also you can choose this all tax types allowed. If you're not sure whether the input tax will output tax will be applicable to a particular GL account, okay, now the next transaction code is OBCL. So here you have to ensure that our company codes are allocated for non-taxable transactions. And if you go to the position and enter SUK1, so you will notice that the both of our company code SUK1 and SUS1 have got input tax and output tax. You know from where the zero is, you know from where these zero values are coming out. So basically, if you go back to the transaction code FTXP, you will notice that the V0 and A0 represents the 0% tax. And that's why we are assigning these two different tax codes to both of our company codes in the event of non-taxable transactions. So that's it. So we will proceed to the next activity. In this lecture, I will demonstrate to you the configuration related to tolerance limit for users, GL accounts, customer, or vendor. This is a part of SAP S/4HANA Finance. Here is a business scenario explaining why we need tolerance limits. The finance manager wants to define the different authorizations for posting high amounts to the accounting staff. He also wants to set a tolerance limit for posting in single accounts in local currency. Additionally, he wants to set a posting limit for payments differences in customer or vendor related transactions. I am on the SAP Easy Access screen. Go to the transaction code SPRO, then click SAP reference IMG, and then navigate to financial accounting, general ledger accounting, business transactions, open items clearing, clearing differences. Scroll down, and then the first option you can see is define tolerance group for GL accounts. Execute this now, and you will be landed on the screen. To define the tolerance group for accounts, which can be created by company code in the local currency, I will select the standard SAP company code, that is 0001, then click details, and you will be landed on the screen. At the moment, you can see that the debit posting and the credit posting are set to 0, and the percentage is also 0. Click the copy button and replace it with your company code, that is SUK1, and this is the standard example. You can change the name to the standard tolerance group and then press enter. Now, if you want to assign any values, for an example for debit posting and credit posting in local currencies, you can do that according to the business transactions. Remember that the debit posting is open item clearing differences by amount or percentage. And similarly, the credit posting is open item clearing differences by amount or percentage. You do not need to enter both the values. Secondly, the important part is that I haven't entered any tolerance group. The blank tolerance group for GL account is the one that every company code should always have for open item clearing differences. So this is your requirement that every company code should have it. So I will copy the same for the US company code, then press enter and save. Go back. Secondly, if you're wondering where you have to assign these tolerances or tolerances group, if you run the transaction code FS00, now under any GL account, especially the balance sheet GL account, now go to the control data. Under account control in company code, and the tolerance group will be blank. If you create a tolerance group, you will see the tolerance group name there. But if you leave it blank, then the standard tolerance group will be used, which is what we have just created. So now you understand that if the tolerance group is blank in a GL account, then the standard tolerance group for the GL account will be used. Go back. Second, I'm already under the display IMG screen. This time I will go under the node, account receivables and account payables. Expand this node. Then go under the subnode, business transactions, open item clearing, clearing differences, and then execute defined tolerances for customers and suppliers. One thing to note here is that execute defined tolerances for the customers and suppliers, and you will be landed on the screen. Again, the blank tolerance group for customers and vendors is the one that every company code should always have. Secondly, the tolerance group for customers and vendors can be created by company code in the local currency. You can create the tolerance group and then assign the tolerance group under the customer master and the vendor master according to the business requirement. So let's first create a blank tolerance group for customers and vendors. Select it, then click copy and replace 0001 company code with your company code, such as SUK1. Press enter, and the number of copied entries will be done. Save it, create a new customizing request, and name it as customer or vendor tolerance. Hit save, press enter to continue, and the data will be saved. If you double click on your company code, you can go through the setting here. First, the specifications for clearing transactions, which is about receiving the payments from the customer or making the payments to the supplier. Then various settings such as due date, early base date, cash discount terms, and further permitted payment differences. For an example, when you receive the payment from the customer or make the payment to the supplier, the permitted payment differences are shown. Further, there are permitted payment differences for automatic write-off, and the specifications for posting residual items from payment differences. As you can see, the customer or the vendor tolerances also have a fixed payment term under that. If you want to replace that, you can do so. Or you can also choose the payment from the invoice. We can also select this option if you want the payment terms to be used from the financial invoice rather than the fixed payment term. That's it. This configuration is usually done by the finance team. As a sourcing and procurement consultant, you do not need to worry about it. As this is a training from sourcing and procurement, it is a requirement that this configuration should exist. I'll copy this customer or vendor tolerance and assign it to your US company code as well. Hit save and the data will be saved. Go back. Further, if you want to create a tolerance group, you can do that. But if you leave it blank, you do not assign any tolerance group under the vendor or the customer master data. Then the blank tolerance will be the one working by default. So that's it. I will proceed to the next activity. In this lecture, we will do the integration between SAP S/4HANA Finance and Sourcing and Procurement module. So as a consultant, you want to know the integration points between SAP S/4HANA Finance and Controlling and SAP S/4HANA Sourcing and Procurement or Material Management module. So that's the business scenario. This activity is done by SAP consultants. They can either be SAP Finance Consultant or SAP S/4HANA Sourcing and Procurement Consultant. So they have to collaborate together in order to do this integration. When I will show you the step-by-step integration, you will understand at which step can be done by SAP Finance Consultant and which one has to be done by the SAP Sourcing and Procurement Consultant. Now, the transaction code that is normally used to define the GL accounts for material management is OBYC. If you are not already familiar with this transaction code, you can make a note of it. And here it's menu path. Here you have to assign the GL accounts in the transactions for MM. For an example, inventory postings. For inventory postings, we use the transaction key BSX. Similarly, for offsetting entry for inventory posting, it is GBP. Unplanned delivery cost, UPF. Purchase input tax, VST. Output tax, MWS. General ledger clearing accounts, WRX. So all these transactions require GL accounts. So that these transactions can be posted into particular GL accounts at finance side. So that's what we have to do. And along with that, there will be some other requirements which you need to understand in order to make these integration points. So on this system, you can either run the transaction code OBYC or you can go through the menu path. Let's go through the menu path. Hit the transaction SPRO and then go under SAP reference IMG, and then you have to go under the node material management, and you can access the node under valuation and account assignment, and then expand the node account determination, and then account determination without wizard. Here there are 4 to 5 steps which you have to do as a part of configurations. So the OBY6 transaction code you can access through this node, that is the configuration automatic postings. So if you execute it, you can click cancel and then click account assignments, and then you will be landed the transaction code OBYC. It is a long menu path to access this transaction. It's better you can if you access through the transaction code, not through the menu path. So here is as I mentioned that there was few transactions which you have must to assign the GL accounts. For example, inventory postings. So double click on it and the dialog box will ask you for chart of accounts. And here we are using the standard chart of accounts, that is INT provided by the SAP. Press enter to continue. And you will notice that the integration is already been done. You can see the assignments of GL accounts has already been made, along with combination of valuation modification and valuation classes. Now, because we have copied the GL chart of accounts, so SAP has already done this integration. Because we were using the chart of accounts template that is assigned to our company code, and this assignment has already been made. So you just have to understand as a consultant that what if you have to make an integration points in between sourcing and procurement and finance? What is the valuation modification and what is the valuation class? So that's what I have to make you understand. Then we will see the GL accounts. Let us take an example of a raw material. For a raw material, we use the valuation class. Now, if you click on this, and you will see that 3000 represents the raw material as a valuation class, and the valuation modification is 0001. Now, and with the combination, if a material master is a raw material, then the posting will be made into the GL accounts. Now, what is valuation modification? What is valuation modification? So it is actually a valuation modifier. It is also known as a valuation grouping code. It is also called as a valuation grouping code. It indicates a grouping of valuation areas having some business properties for the account determination. It minimizes the number of entries to be created for automatic account determination for the stock postings. Before using valuation grouping code, it needs to be activated in the transaction code OMWM. And here it's menu path. So if we follow the menu path by going back You can see that is the first step. Define valuation control. Now, if you execute it, so the first thing you have to check whether the valuation grouping code is active or not. So it is already active. Now go back. Further, it is assigned to the valuation area in the transaction code OMWT, and here its menu path. So together with the other factors, the valuation grouping code determines the GL accounts to which the goods movement is posted. That is automatic account determination. For an example, the valuation area 1000 and 2000 are required to be posted to the same GL accounts. They are grouped to the valuation group code 0001, and the GL account is determined based on the valuation grouping code and the valuation class. So that's what I will show you on the SAP system. So I'm already under the node account determination without wizard. So go to the second step, that is group together valuation areas. Execute it, and here you can see the valuation area. If you remember that in the beginning we have defined the valuation area in the enterprise structure. And SAP provides two options for the valuation area at plant level or valuation area at the company code level. So we choose the valuation area at the plant level. So the valuation area also represents our plant. Now, if you go to the position and then search your plant and then press enter to continue, and you can see the assignment. Valuation area of plant and the company code are here in the valuation group code as we mentioned in this slide. That if two valuation areas, such as in our case, these plans are required to be posted in the same GL accounts, and these are grouped to the valuation group code 0001. And the GL is determined based on the valuation grouping code and the valuation class. Now I will enter the 0001 here against the UK plant, and the same valuation grouping code I will enter against the US plant. Hit save and create a new customizing request, and it will be the valuation grouping code. Hit save, press enter to continue, and the data was saved. Now, if you go to the transaction code OPYC, you understand that why valuation modifier represents the 0001 and where is it configured. So its configured is here. Valuation area, company codes, chart of accounts, and valuation grouping code. And the value and that valuation grouping code determines the GL accounts with the combination of valuation class, right? Now, the question is, what is valuation class? As I already mentioned that it represents the different types of materials such as raw materials, okay? But I will demonstrate you in more details. Now, if you go back, now you have the third step, that is defined valuation class. If you do not want to follow the menu, its transaction code is OMSA. So the valuation class categorizes the GL accounts on the basis of material type. For example, the raw materials will have a different GL accounts than the finished materials, as the cost will be different in both the cases. Account category references is also maintained along with the valuation class. That's what I will demonstrate you on SAP system. The valuation class has the following functions. It allows these stocks values for the materials of the same material type to be posted to the different GL accounts. Stock values of materials of the different materials type to be posted to the same GL accounts. It determines, together with other factors, the GL accounts updated for evaluation relevant transactions such as the good movements. It is defined for the combination of plant and the material in accounting one view of material master. Go to the SAP, and so let's execute the defined valuation class. And the first thing you have to check is the account category reference. So account category reference is already been provided by SAP. So these are the templates which you have to take a look. Account category reference for raw material is 0001. And if you go back, the second valuation class, click on it, you can see the combination of valuation class. As I showed you that the valuation class is 3000 represents the raw material, and the account category references 0001 also refers to the raw material. So this is the table is already been provided by SAP, which may company can use. Otherwise, we can also create their customized valuation class and account category reference. Now go back. The third is the material type or account category reference. Now here you can see the material type. So as we mentioned, the material type refers to different types of materials. SAP has already provided the template of material type that can be used. For an example, if you can see here, FERT material type refers to the finished product. Similarly, if you scroll down, we have a trading goods represented by HAWA, semi-finished products represented by HALB, and further, if you scroll down, you can also find the raw materials that is represented by ROH. And it is assigned to the account category reference 0001. Now, sometimes this assignment is missing and user can have an error while working or creating the purchase order into the SAP S/4HANA sourcing and procurement module. So they have to come to know that this assignment is missing. So you just have to check whether the assignment is already made. If you're going to use the transaction or if you're going to use the standard material type and the standard account category reference by not creating your own custom material type, now you have to know the valuation class is 3000 and the material type is ROH for the raw material. And you also know that this 3000 valuation class is assigned to the transaction OBYC that determines the GL accounts and the combination of valuation modifier. So as I mentioned that this valuation class is also defined in the material master accounting one view. For an example of a raw materials and the valuation class is assigned under the customizing accounting one tab. So whenever this material will be used in that transaction, so automatically the valuation class will be picked up from the general ledger account and that will be the 300,000. So you know how the cycle or the combination works in order to determine the general ledger account into your financial module. Okay. Now if you go back and go under the transaction GBB that represents the offsetting entry in the inventory posting. So if you double click on it, you will be landed on the screen. Now here you can see a new column that says the general modification or the account modification. Now where is it coming and what it is? Its transaction is OMWN. This is the key is used to determine the different GL accounts for the same kind of a goods movements based on the origin and target. When making offset entries for the inventory posting, you can enter the key which is assigned to the transaction key for the moment type in transaction code OMWN. And that's what I will demonstrate to you. If you go back and go to the next step that is define account grouping for moment types, execute it, and you are already in the transaction code OMWN. So that is for the account modification or general modification. And this is represented by the second last column, that is account modification. Now, if you go back to the transaction code OBYC and you can take a look that it got a value of AUA, AUF. So what is it? Now, if you go back to the transaction code OMWN, we can see that the value of AUF here, and you can also see the current entry of GBP AUF here as well, right in the same transaction. Now, if you go back, the first column is moment type. So what is moment type? So moment type is a three-character key which differentiates the various material moments. For an example, if it is a goods receipt, so the moment type that will be picked up is 101. Similarly, for goods issue, the transfer posting will have their own moment type. If you click on moment type, you can take a look. SAP's already has been provided the list of movement types that represents the nature of material movements. So, as you can see, 101 represents the goods receipts and further 102 for pure reversal. So the different transactions into the sourcing and procurement modules are done by choosing the right momentum. Okay. And you have to return the vendor movement type, and further if you go down you can see that you have the movement type for transfer plant to plant, transfer plant in storage locations. So the list of movement type is already been provided by SAP, but you can create your own custom movement types as well. We will have a separate lecture on movement types in our upcoming lectures. At the moment, you can just see the combination with the movement types and then the special stock. Special stock is represented by a single alphabet. As you can see it, if as you can see, if we take a look at 101, that is goods, receipts, and K. And if we click on this button, you will notice that L represents the supplier consignment and special stock indicator can be looked at with the combination of moment type and the valuation updating and value updating and the quantity update. So these are the part of materials, and that if the materials will come to your stock, the value will be updated and the quantity will be updated as well. So you have the moment indicator, consumption, and value strings, consecutive counters, and transactions event key. So these transaction event key, you can already see them in the transaction OBYC. So here you can see the transaction GBP, and in the GBP the combination of valuation, modifier, general modification, valuation class, and then we have a debit and credit GL accounts accordingly offsetting into the entry for the inventory posting. So the table has already been provided by SAP with all the possible options. You can take a look. Now, if you're wondering that how you can make these columns, from where these columns come, when you are in the transaction OBYC, so basically these are called rules. Now you have an option here, rules. Now if you click on this button, you will notice that before making any assignment, so this assignment is already there because we are using the standard chartered accounts. But if you are not using the standard chartered accounts for your organization, which is most probably the finance consultant job, so they will be using a custom standard chart of accounts, and the assignments for all the accounts will not be there. So when he comes first time on the screen, he will have an option to make a rule by creating or by marking these check boxes. So whatever the combination he likes, maybe he doesn't like the general modification, he also have an option to uncheck it. But SAP Standard has made this assignment with the combination of all these four, right? Now if you go back, you can double click and then come back on the screen. You can see the combination of valuation modifier, general modifier, valuation, class, debit, and credit. Now you can understand that how these three columns have got the values and their transaction codes as separate. And with the combination of them, there is an integration with GL accounts. So similarly, if you go back, you have to ensure that for almost all the transaction codes which will be used in sourcing and procurement module, there should be an assignment with the GL accounts. For an example, output tax, if you double click on it, you have already got an assignment for output tax. If you scroll down, we have the GRIR clearing account. If we take a look, we have already got an assignment for the GL account here as well. So if any of the GL account is missing, then you can have an error in the sourcing and procurement module, and in the live business environment, you have to speak to the finance consultant in order to assign the GL accounts. Because maybe a sourcing and procurement consultant does not know that which particular GL account will be made for a particular transaction. For an example, the PRD, the cost price differences, he doesn't know this number. Maybe the sourcing and the procurement consultant does not know that which particular GL account assignment will be made for a particular consultant. Okay. So but for your practice, if you will use the standard chart of accounts that is INT, you do not need to worry about this assignment. You must know how to make an assignment if you have to work in the live business environment. Now there is a third transaction code that is OMWP, and it is an automatic posting where used left in GL accounts in account determination. Now if you run the transaction code OMWP, click cancel and then click on GL accounts and then enter your company code, enter your valuation area and then execute it. Now you have a broader view for all the assignments of GL accounts in one screen. So that's what you can see. I have showed you in the PRD cost price difference. Now you can also see valuation grouping code. That's what you can see. You can also see the valuation grouping code and these are the GL account numbers, right? It may be helpful transaction code when you start working as a consultant. So this will be quite handy. Now that's the end of our lecture and I will proceed to the next activity.